What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 115 of Powerline Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Lucas. All right, this week's guest is Brandon Hill. What I really like about Brandon is his perspective from not only the line side perspective, but management. He's way up in management for a very well-known powerline company out of the United States. So he gives a really great perspective, like I said, from the lineman side and from management side. Not only that, Brandon was a survivor of a helicopter accident. He was actually sitting on the skid of a helicopter when there was a tail rotor strike and the chopper went down, landing the opposite side of him. So he talks all about surviving that and overcoming it. Great episode, tons of value. Let's just jump right into episode 115 with Brandon Hill. All right, Brandon, thank you for taking the time out of your day to do this. For starters, welcome to Powerline Podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're a busy dude. This took a couple weeks to get schedules organized, and that's kind of rare for this industry. So usually it's people saying, oh, hey, I got a trouble call. You mind if we reschedule to tomorrow? But I appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. It's awesome.
Sorry about that. Definitely wanted to get this done. So
it's all good. So I like to start these and give people some context of like who you are and where you're from and that sort of thing. So tell me a little bit about your background, like where you grew up, where you're from, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small town from Missouri. Kind of got into line work because I'm from a town of about 330 people, and I'd say there's probably a good 25 or 30 of them that happened to get into line work. And they ranged everywhere from groundmen to vice presidents of PAR. So a lot of people went this way. You were kind of either a farmer or you left town or you got into line work. So I grew up on a farm, helping on the farm. And I just kind of always knew that this is what I wanted to do. Some of the people I looked up to as kids went this route. So as soon as I graduated high school, I applied to get in the apprenticeship. At that time, they weren't taking a lot of apprentices, so I actually got on with a line clearance contractor while I was waiting to get into the apprenticeship. Did that for about a year. So I got in the apprenticeship in 2004, topped out 2007. Pretty quickly after I topped out, started traveling around, worked a lot on the East Coast. I was able to get into the Quanta Bare Hand program.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I went out to Connecticut, Massachusetts, worked a lot out there. Great group of guys up there. In 2009, a buddy of mine talked me into getting on a helicopter job out there, changing out some static to OPGW. We actually happened to get in an accident on that job. The helicopter got into the static behind us. It kind of lost track of his tail rotor. So we crashed. None of us had fatal injuries, luckily, but it did put me and my buddy out of work for about a year. So after that, there was an opportunity to go into the training side of Quanta's Energized Services group. I took that opportunity, worked with those guys for a couple years, and then I just was itching to get back in the field. So that's what I did. 2012, I went back to the field and kind of been working all over the country ever since. I worked at home. I still have a family and a place in Missouri. I would kind of go wherever the good jobs were, try to stick with some of my buddies that I really enjoyed working with. One thing led to another, ended up in California just as a foreman GF type position with one of my buddies for Michaels back in 2018. And the fires happened and work exploded out here, and I've just kind of moved up as we've grown.
Put some roots down.
Well, organically, kind of the company's grown, and so my role has grown a little bit. So now I'm general manager of this division, which pretty much handles Northern California and now Arizona. So
I love this transition that you've gone through from the field into management. I took a similar path. And there's not a lot of people that actually decide to do that and make that switch, especially from the crew side to the field side to management. So definitely want to unpack that a little bit. But something you said at the beginning that I just want to ask you a couple questions on. What do you think that it is about like farm kids and that rural upbringing? Like very similar to my background. I grew up in a line family. My father was a lineman. I ran a small power line company. Same thing, small town. It was a forestry and mining town, but like probably more than a dozen of my friends or people I knew became part of this trade, either line workers or, on the heavy equipment side or whatever, but straight from the forestry industry or like farming or whatever. What do you think that it is? Do you see any sort of a shift? Like, is it like urban kids too, or do you still see more rural?
I think since I've been in California, there's a shift here for sure. There's a lot more of the urban kids that, that's their way out. A lot of their parents push them to try to find something. And literally, so a lot of these guys just go applying for anything, or they go to a career fair. And now there's a lot more JTC presence.
Gotcha.
Line schools have a lot more presence there. As far as when I got in the trade, I think the correlation between farm kids was just work ethic. And if you worked hard in line work as a contractor, anyway, I have no experience as, with the utility side, but what I liked about it and what sold it to me was I saw people that worked hard and there was no limitation. Like you didn't have to have so many years of service. It wasn't seniority. They rewarded the hardest working employees and they moved up. And so the people that I had personal relationships with that had kind of moved up through the ranks, I saw that they were rewarded for hard work. And I felt like I was not afraid to work hard coming from a farm. So it was kind of a natural transition for me, really.
Quanta has this kind of a push right now to invest in that ranch rodeo community, same sort of thing, that rural ranch rodeo community. And I just interesting to talk to people to see what their perspectives are on whether they think that's still a good thing to do or whether you're seeing a shift out there. And I agree with you on like from my perspective, seeing it from like the social media world and seeing a lot of that, there's just more urban kids than there are rural kids, right? Which is different than my small town perspective when I grew up. But it's kind of neat. I still want to keep that alive, and I still want to keep that opportunity there for the rural kid to get a chance to do something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this trade appeals to them more, honestly. And what I'm seeing a lot of now is like these kind of remote states like Idaho, Montana, Wyoming. The line schools and the JTCs are really targeting those places, and
Gotcha.
It's working. Like we get a lot of apprentices and young linemen that come from that part of the country, and they all work hard. They don't mind traveling because they're kind of used to nothing being very close together in those states. So, but I honestly can't say that, that there's a huge difference, because we've had city kids from LA, Compton, that have been really awesome hands too. They're different. It takes a little bit, of a different foreman maybe for them, somebody that can motivate them differently or lead them differently. But
sure,
we've had really good luck with, guys from all walks of life.
That's super interesting. Yeah, it's really neat. I like that. So getting into your history, your background, it seems like you spent majority of time in the transmission side of things after topping out.
Yep. Yeah. I did distribution for sure as an apprentice. to get through the apprentice with. But I guess my first step or second step job that I got put on was transmission, and I just loved it. And you were out in the middle of nowhere in Missouri back in those days. Nobody bothered you. It was just awesome. And so I guess I just became better at doing that work. I mean, I would get into, doing distribution for a while, and I would feel like I didn't want to go back and do transmission. But then when I would fall right back into that groove and just remember how fun it was.
Yeah.
A lot of guys say that transmission, you got to have a big back and a small mind or whatever, but it's not true. It's just different things that can injure you. I mean, you're worried a lot more about tensions and weights and forces and heights, and it's just different. Distribution obviously can be dangerous, but it's totally different. It's just different hazards that you have to identify and mitigate. So I definitely gravitated more towards the transmission side, though.
Yeah. How long did you worked with Energized Services? Did you actually hire right on with Quanta Energized Services?
Yeah. So I know I listened to one of your other podcasts. I know for sure, Greg Bell.
Yeah.
So Greg was my mentor when I worked there. There was a few others. I don't know if you've ever met Pete McKay.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Came on right after I left. Him and I were working together in Connecticut whenever I was actually in that helicopter accident. So him and I are very close friends. I know he's went there full time since I've left. But yeah, that was an awesome experience. I honestly think I was too young and not really ready for a position like that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to try it. It was an opportunity, and I thought I can always go back in my tools. I've got a ticket in my pocket, so why not take advantage of the opportunity? So I did. I learned a lot, and I'm pretty glad I did it for sure.
Yeah, I love the program. I worked for QES for 2.5 years as well. I ended up teaching at the line school portion more than I did the bare hand side of things, but big background in bare hand work as well. Did bare hand work for 5 years from 2013, 14 to 2020. Yeah, pretty cool industry, pretty cool opportunity. Explain the helicopter accident. If there's anything within that you, for one, can talk about, or any advice that you can give that kind of come out of learnings from that.
Yeah. So since I've came to Michael's, we train all of our JLs in our HEC program. And so with that, it requires a field expert to kind of perform the training along with our safety and training group. And I try to have a big role in that because I can tell you without a doubt some things that led to that accident. So we had been working with one helicopter vendor for several months, and we were all in sync. The pilots knew where we should be, when we should be there. If you weren't there, they're shaking the stick. Something's up, to step back and take a look at it and see what's going on because something's not right. PAR actually had multiple jobs, and they had slated that same vendor for multiple jobs at the same time, and they had to get a second vendor. The second vendor was a different vendor, and I don't know that it's worth naming who they are. I have nothing against them. This was just a situation. But I will say, the first vendor, when you were in a tailboard, that pilot was in charge. And that pilot was talking about any possible scenario you could run into up there. And the first morning the other vendor showed up, we had our tailboard, and they basically were just the guy driving the helicopter. They had no input on the tailboard. We had to ask to see where the shutoff was, the fuel shut off, the battery shut off. That should have been a clue. But honestly, I was young and naive, and I thought, these guys, this is what they do. They know what they're doing. So who am I to question them? Well, I unknowingly just threw my life on the skid and strapped in and took off that morning. And we had been to this structure multiple times. And what it was is a floater. It was a low structure. It was a floater, and we hadn't changed the traveler out multiple times to get that fiber in. we had it all in. And every time we had changed it out, we had climbed this structure. It was one span off the road, and it was kind of tight with the right-of-way, the tree overhang. So we never chanced it, and the first vendor wouldn't chance it. So this morning, we're going to sag and clip the rest of this pole, and we need to change that traveler out because now it's pulling the conductor down because we have our big traveler up there. So we assume we're going to go climb this structure and change this out. The pilot comes on the radio and says, hey, I can get in there. Come to the LZ and I'll take you guys in there. Like I said, I was naive. We didn't question anything. We rolled into the LZ, packed our gear on, hooked on. He took us out, and this was the very first flight, and he dropped us off on the structure. And at that time, we were doing skid transfers to wood poles. So as soon as we got off, we noticed the vendor we were used to flying with, anytime we did a skid transfer, he kept his tail rotor, at a 45 away from the conductor. And I mean, as soon as we stepped off the skid, we both hooked in our lanyards and said, man, that was close to the tail rotor. And we literally said, when we get back to the LZ, we're going to bring this up. And so we do our thing, change out the traveler, call for the bird to come pick us up. And when he picked us up, same thing, got the tail rotor too close. There's like some stabilizer. They look like a spoiler, and they had like an end cap on the tail of that 500. And he just happened to get that underneath the static. And so, or the fiber, whatever. So anyway, as he goes to lift, we don't notice it. He didn't notice it until now he sucked all the belly out of the wire, throws the pitch off of the helicopter. He couldn't catch it. So then the main rotors hit the structure that we'd just gotten off of. And it we got lucky because the fiber wrapped in the rotor. And so it kind of actually deadened our fall, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I got knocked out somewhere in the fall. The last thing I remembered was being underneath the helicopter as it was going down, thinking that, this was probably it for us. And somehow, I don't know if the pilot was able to do it or if it was due to the wire being wrapped in the rotor, but we did land on the opposite side. So as far as injuries for me, I broke a couple of vertebrae in my neck and broke all three of the main bones in my left arm and collapsed both lungs and broke my sternum. So honestly, I think I felt real weak or something, but it was the mental thing took longer for me to get over than the physical ailments, and it was tough. Like, I mentioned they offered that position with Energized Services because they didn't know if I would be able to go back to regular duty or not. And so I wasn't mentally ready to go back at that time. So it was a good bridge for me, to actually be involved in the trade again. They would send me out to help out on jobs up here and there. And I knew after about a year, I knew I was ready to go back to work.
Damn, that's so what is something for the person listening that is like maybe in that position? Like you said I was young. Well, that's like a good portion of the industry right now is they don't have a lot of this experience that, it's just the facts. So many people have come in and it's very young right now. What's your advice to them that are maybe like quiet or whatever, just like speak up, like when you feel or you have those feelings or see those things? Anyway.
Yeah. So there was a lineman that I worked with a few years ago, and he would say, if you're thinking about saying something or speaking up, then you should have already done it. Because if you're watching somebody work and you see something that could cause an accident, the time that you take to think, should I say anything, the accident could happen and those guys' lives could be changed forever. And that was really good advice. And I pass that on to a lot of these young guys when they come through. And if I'm able to help with the helicopter class, I just explain to these guys that you literally are putting your life in those pilots' hands. Go talk to them. See what they did last night. See where they've been working, what their experience is. There's a need for so many pilots right now, at least in California specifically, that PG&E decided to start managing the helicopter vendor on their own. So they just assign you a vendor. So go vet those guys. Ask a question because, if that pilot crashes, he may lose his job, but hopefully it isn't fatal. He doesn't lose his life. If you're on the line, the chance of you surviving a helicopter crash is very low. So, it's his livelihood on the line if you go question him, but it's literally your life on the line. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask any questions. I don't know how to get young guys to speak up and to understand that because I just know how I was. I just wanted to impress everybody that I worked with and do a good job and get stuff done. And I threw a lot of caution to the wind as a kid. I would say our industry has done a pretty good job of trying to combat that and overcome that. I would say there was a lot more of a cowboy attitude, 20 years ago than there is now. Yeah. Speak up.
You make a good point about throwing caution to the wind a little bit too. And that does come with the age factor, right? Because I remember risking a lot more when I was younger as well in heli work. And because it's fun and exciting and it's just like there's something happening and it's cool and it's unique and not everybody in the world or anybody else that even does stuff like this at all. And if you're not if you don't have that fear bone in you, and you're willing to just risk to do things like this anyway, it's exciting. But I think that we really do got to watch ourselves. I remember getting carried away as well a couple times, just kind of on that edge a little bit, and it could have gone either way. And you just look back and you're like, wow, like that, like you said, at the top of the structure, man, that was close. So speaking up, and like you said, speaking up sooner than later, don't wait. And that's one thing that I really appreciated about the bare hand course. And they still have that and really emphasize that in the bare hand course, is to speak up and stop work, get everybody down, make sure everybody's on the same page, rewrite the tailboard if you have to, sign off on the idea, the change in direction, and then go back to work. And I understand that can't all happen all the time, especially in distribution. It's just it's too much, but the idea of that can happen. You can shut people down for 5 seconds, bring the bucket down, just come down, guys. Don't yell from upstairs, come down, or if you're up on the structure, just got dropped off with the helicopter and you notice it was close. I don't know. You got comms? Do you got some way of going, that was close. What's going on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, another thing you mentioned there is, there was all these opportunities. I had comms, I could have done that. I could have shut that down. And the bad thing is we had been on the bare hand crew. So that was kind of ingrained in us. If there's a change in scope, I guess in that situation, I thought, honestly, who am I to question the pilot? This is what he does. And, down the road to find out more about that pilot in particular. And he literally was like the personal pilot for the king of Madagascar and had been in the States doing line work for 3 months. He had very little experience, and I could have found all that out and we could have helped him.
Yeah.
We could have mentioned it. We could have gave him advice on, the last helicopter pilot kind of did this. We like the way that worked. What do you think about this? But it never even crossed my mind. I thought he's the pilot. He knows what he's doing. So I strapped on and away we went.
That's what I appreciate you talking about it, because it needs to continually be brought up. It's just there's no end to this, talking about this stuff and mentioning this, because there's somebody out there that's going through the same situation right now, and it just went a little different for them. But with the amount of line work happening right now and the amount of heli line work happening right now, it's worth doing all these things that you're talking about. Talk to the pilot, bring stuff up, get on comms. be persistent. Like, don't seem like you're being annoying if you're asking these questions. And that's the culture our industry has to try to breed, because the past culture is like, shut up, like, you be a man, tough it out, whatever the excuse was. But that's not the case. There's different things happening right now than there was back then. It's more involved right now. Line work has changed to a point.
Oh, 100%. And what you said about there being so much more heli work, like, I find it all the time out here with environmental restrictions and things. It's almost like the preferred go-to method. And then if you can't do a helicopter set or access with a helicopter, then you consider other options. And I mean, it is a great tool, and used properly, it's fantastic, but you increase your risk so much every time you use a helicopter. So it makes me a little nervous, and that's why I really try to, do what I can. I have a small footprint here at Michael's, but I try to go the extra mile. I don't care if you work for me or for us or not. I'll have this conversation with anybody if it'll help them, feel more comfortable speaking up.
Describe your experience with crew dynamics and crew chemistry and how that plays a role.
Yeah, so a long time ago, I think it was like 2008, I got on this job and Hurricane Katrina happened. We were right in the middle of this job. And so this contractor was dying to keep anybody they could. So a bunch of guys left along the hurricane. So we were shorthanded and we didn't have the best help. And the guy that was in charge of that job, he was just so smart. And I remember him telling me, everybody's good at something. You got to figure out what everybody's good at and have them do that. And that just clicked for me. I mean, this guy pretty much had almost guys off the street, and we built 15 miles of transmission line successfully on time, overcame all the obstacles that we were dealing with. And it was true. Like, you would have a guy that just framed poles, just hauled poles and framed poles because he was good at it. Maybe he wasn't good at pulling wire, so you didn't put him on pulling wire. And I learned so much from that guy. And I've just kind of always, even whenever I was a lineman, I would always think about that. And when you get into a foreman or higher position, it becomes imperative that you figure out that crew dynamic. You put people in positions to succeed, because ultimately it makes you look good too, right? It does nobody any favor for the foreman to come in and say, my crew ain't worth a fuck. This guy's no good, and I need new guys. So let's start over. No, we've trained those guys to where they are. We've invested in them. Let's take a little more time and talk to these guys, work with them. When you figure out something they're good at, then try to, have them do that as much as possible. There's a lot of different things we do out here, but just attitudes, and you know the guys that you can push, the guys that you can rely on in a bind. And the guys that you can't, but you need them all. You can't do this alone. And there is a lot of young guys that get into, like a general foreman spot, and they're going to crack the whip, they think. And I'm not going to put up with anybody, slacking off or not being up to par. Well, pretty soon you find out you're doing this stuff alone, and you can't do that either. So that was some of the best learning experiences that I've ever had, was just being a part of that job, and a couple more after that. But, some of the best advice I ever got was don't be afraid to hire for somebody smarter than you. So or with that.
And it can be, this is an important leadership topic as well, because it's been like a thread or a trend on this show, this topic of exposing the things that people are good at, and then actually taking action on that and using them to their best ability in that thing. Because it makes you look good as a leader too. If you are putting this guy in this position, running a piece of equipment or whatever that thing is that he's really good at, he's going to feel comfortable doing that. He's going to feel like he's excelling doing that and want to do good at it, want to show everybody. And that's just, it helps your job progress. It increases production, safety, all of it. And, even as far as passing down knowledge to the next person, that guy's going to feel more inclined to teach people behind him because he likes what he's doing for work. I don't know. It's all positive. It's all positive, unless he just doesn't want to do it anymore and he's sick of doing that thing that he's really good at, because that happens too. But I don't know. I just see it as like a net positive all around, and it makes you look good as a leader. So you get to go to your boss and be like, look, we're doing really good as a crew. And it's all because you just put people in the right position to succeed.
And it makes everybody's job fun. When you're a crew and you're in sync, this is honestly the best trade there is. And I still believe either foreman or journeyman lineman is the best position. I mean, you show up, you get to go do some really badass stuff. And when you have the right crew, I just think there's no better trade in the world or position in the world to be in. And I go back to when I worked in Connecticut with those bare hand dudes, Pete McKay, one of the sharpest guys I've ever met. Yeah. We all knew each other's next move, and it was awesome. It was just the best time I've ever had in line work.
Yeah, 100%. I like the whole. It's funny because people, they either want to bump up in leadership and in roles, like move up and progress. And I want to ask you about that decision that you made yourself. But then there's also those people that just want to stay as a lineman, and that's cool too, because everyone needs leadership at every level. So you don't have to necessarily be a foreman, because I've seen guys that are absolutely phenomenal linemen, and they're leaders in the lineman role, like just they excel beyond anybody you've ever. But then the second you put them in a foreman position, they just buckle and they just suck at it. And it's just not the right spot for them. So you put them back in that lineman spot and they just excel again. Like, we need leaders at every level.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen that time and time again. I mean, I got a couple guys right now working for me that are that way exactly. We put them in a foreman spot and they put so much pressure on themselves because they just want to do a great job, but they don't know how to lead others.
Yeah.
They're better leading from the bucket by example than being the guy out there, yelling at people to hurry up, come on. And that's just, then guys lay down on you. And, that's been the hardest thing for me, is to try to talk to that guy and tell him, man, you're a great help, but this foreman thing's not really working out. I don't want to lose you, but we might need to take a step back and go back to being a lineman for a while. And it's worked out. I mean, yeah. I've had those conversations, and I think they know I'm coming from a place of respect, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious, from your perspective, what's been the hardest thing and the easiest thing for that transition from line work to an advanced leadership role, whether it's foreman or all the way to management?
Yeah. So, I mean, if anything, I would say I probably had opportunities too fast when I was too young, and it was good to kind of take a step back. And then when I had the chance again, I feel like I was more ready to be a foreman and general foreman and so on. The biggest thing to me is taking care of your guys. I think there used to be, when I first got in this trade, a lot of the general foremen that I worked for were yellers and screamers, and it motivated me because my grandfather and my dad were that way. So I grew up, being talked to like a piece of garbage, and I just worked harder. That made me work harder because I wanted them to respect me. Not everybody's like that. So when I first got on the trade, there was still a lot of those guys around, a lot. And I excelled in that environment, but I knew I didn't want to treat people that way if I ever had the chance to lead. And so, I honestly feel like your success as a general foreman or above is 100% on the guys you have working for you. And if they're happy, then, and you give them everything they need to succeed, then they're going to make you look good. And that's what's happened. I mean, I got a few dudes that were my friends that came out here when I first got out here. We had one little job. We did that job successfully. And then we grew to like 75 crews. And it was organic. It wasn't, it just kind of happened. And I never envisioned being in this role. But there was a lot of opportunities where they were kind of like, well, you're the natural person to progress and take this over. So for me, the biggest curve from going into management was learning the financial and the business side of the trade. And it's eye-opening. I mean, the attitude you have as a lineman is these guys are making billions of dollars and just get me more shit. And if I break it, get me another one. And once we start seeing the cost of things and then the amount that we're getting paid from these utilities, we're not out here breaking the bank. You know, it takes a lot of volume to make, you know, a little bit of money. So that was eye-opening for sure. And I find that whenever I was a GF, nobody shared that information with me. Nobody, you know, I guess you thought you were doing a good job based on like performance and safety of your crews, but you never really knew. And when I came to this company, they didn't hide anything. You know, they wanted your input from the bidding process through execution. And then if it lost money or didn't do as well as they thought, they wanted to share that with you so you knew. And that was super cool for me. I mean, I like math. I'm kind of a numbers guy a little bit. So I don't know. I took to it. And I guess that's kind of another reason why I was able to move up, just because I was able to grasp that side as easily as I was. So I try to pass that down now. Like whenever I have a general foreman working for me and say, I planned a job like this, with 2 crews for 10 days or whatever, and he wants to go out there with 4 crews for 4 days, I'll sit him down and I'll say, okay, this is how I planned it. And if you want to do it a different way, let's talk about it. But this is what the impacts will be financially to the company. And then those guys are like, wow, I never thought about it that way. And then they start thinking differently. And I don't know, man, I'm just really in sync with these guys that work for me. And there's guys I know out there that you could tell them, hey, I bid this job for this much. They know they could go out there and kill it, and then they could slow walk and suck the rest of the money out of the job. I just don't have those dudes working for me. And I'm proud of that. I'm proud of these guys because they want to do a good job. And that's another thing that we've been able to do as a company. I mean, we do have a president of our company that's not from a utility background. He's got a little gas background, but he is really smart at knowing who makes him successful. And he's let us kind of run this thing the way we want. So our vice president is a lineman. I'm a lineman. All of our operations managers down are linemen. And so I feel like we all have the lineman's best intentions in mind. Just, yeah, I care about a lot of these guys because they're my friends. But honestly, if I'm being 100% honest, I want to be successful too. And I know taking care of these guys and being the contractor that people want to work for and giving them the stuff they need, the tooling, the equipment to be successful. You know, there's so many travelers in California. They'll come here and work for 3 months and they can be a great hand, but they're going home when they want to go home. If I can leave an impression on them that they go home and tell their buddy, if you go to California, this is the contractor you want to work for, that's what it's all about for me. And we get a lot of that, you know. And California is tough because you get a lot of people that just do anything to get out here. And, you know, a lot of guys maybe don't have the background or the experience that they claim they did. And somehow they got their ticket and they got on the books and got a job. So it's imperative to have the word of mouth, the reputation, to be the contractor that good hands want to work for, at least in California. I think everywhere, but I know it's very important. Yeah. This is the toughest place I've ever worked, without a doubt.
Yeah, I don't doubt that at all. It's really neat having that ability to to work with the people below you and know that you were in their position at some point in time, and so you think like them, right? Not only do you know the job like they know the job, but you know what things you wanted or what things you wanted to know, being in that position that you didn't know now in the position that you're in. So I'm sure that helps that communication point, you know, like And that's so cool that you're open enough to communicate, not keep everything top secret power line, right? Because that's all that we ever wanted, or most guys ever want, the good ones anyway, is to do a good job, like you said. Or, like, we're competitive too. I'm sure you were competitive, in that position, right? You wanted to make money for yourself, but you weren't in it to sandbag it. You wanted to, produce, right? Because it feels good to do that, and it helps you get more work and, get on better jobs. Like, you understand that. So if you can help people below you understand those numbers, because there was always that guy on the crew as well that's like, the company's making bags, like, you got so much bread. I'm like, yeah, but that bucket truck you just wrecked this morning, like, that was the profit for the job. So
yeah, exactly. We have a huge problem out here with trees, overhanging trees on roads, and guys, they don't take the time to get a spotter and drive around them. They'll just drive and they'll destroy a brand new bucket. And, that's $5,000 or $6,000 every time. We were never going to make $5,000 profit. But now it takes 3 days to pay for that one mess up that you had today. And, I know Ryan Smith was on here, and he would tell you this. When he first came to work for me, he was that guy. He was like, you rich bastards, go buy another. And I showed him, I just set him down and I said, look at this, man. This is the reality. I don't know what you think, but this is reality. And man, he did a 180, and then he started like keeping track of how much tooling he was buying. And, tooling's big for me because I feel like that's an investment that's going to make you more successful, more productive. So there's a fine line. I mean, if you give guys free reign, they're going to
for sure
spend a ton of money. And I get that. But if you kind of show them like, if we can have this better stuff and be more productive in the end, by all means, and guys pick up on that and they want to work for you, and then they want to do a good job so they can get the next good job. And, it compounds. I think just having a culture of guys that want to do a great job and feel like they're a part of something. I mean, another small thing that we're able to do that we got buy-in from our president is, if these guys go do a job and we planned it for 12% profit and it comes out to 20, we'll cut those guys a check back to them, down to the GF and foreman level. And it's not $100,000, but it's a few thousand, and it's something, and it's not something you get very many places in this trade. So, I mean, just stuff like that. I think these guys, it makes them care and want to do a great job. I think they already do, but at least that way they feel like you notice and that you care.
That's a big thing too. It's just like feeling like you noticed, right? And not keeping everything so private and secured, and totally understand that, when it comes down to like bidding a project, you got to keep some numbers in tight. But for the things that you can share, I think it's important to talk about it. Not enough people talk about money. And it goes right back to just even like your personal financial life, like at home environment. Like, not enough people talk about money, like parents talking to your kids about money and kids talking to parents, and, like, sit around the table and just talk about finances and money and like there's not enough of that. And that's how it starts, right? It starts as a kid and you end up this adult working for a big organization, a big position. And if you're not talking to your kids about your workers about money, I don't know. I think it's important.
I wish there was more classes in school, like in high school, that would prepare you for your financial future. Because I know I wasn't prepared for it. And then you get out, and making line wages is pretty good money for an 18 or 19-year-old kid. And before you know it, I've got more payments than I could really afford. Then you get hurt. Nobody as a kid thinks they're going to get hurt, but then it happened, and you're like, I need to move into a smaller place. I might need to get rid of the second vehicle. And I look back now, older, and I think, God, I was so stupid. What was I thinking? And I try to tell these kids that coming in now not to do it, but they just go, and they get those paychecks. They got the new truck, lifted, the nicest camper. And I hope nothing happens to you. I hope you're still putting money away because it's important.
Yeah. Yeah. I've gone all the way up and all the way back down 3 times. So, it does happen very quick. So give some advice to that 18, 19-year-old guy right now.
I mean, for me, it would be try new things, get outside your comfort zone. When I was an apprentice coming through Missouri Valley, where they didn't have an apprentice rotation, so you could get on with a contractor as a first step apprentice, and you could literally work in a couple different show ups until you're ready to top out and know all the same people, the same company, and kind of the same game. What they do in California that I think is pretty cool is they rotate these guys every 6 months and make you work for different contractors doing different types of work. I recommend that, especially if you're a young guy that just topped out and you don't have any family or kids yet. It's a great opportunity to get out and see the country, do different things, see the way guys do things differently in different areas, because it's crazy. This is the same trade, but you can go across this country and working rules are different everywhere you go. The terminology for what guys call things is different across the country. It's just interesting, in different cultures. I'm really glad that I traveled. I still am traveling, I guess, although I've been in the same spot for like 6 years, but I'm just grateful for the things that I got to do. I went and helped down in Puerto Rico on that for a little bit, and that was super cool. I don't know. I say do as many new different things as you can, but don't be in a rush. If I could give myself advice at that age, I would have told myself to slow the fuck down, because I couldn't wait to get through the apprenticeship so I could top out and go do what I wanted. So I wish I would have just taken my time, enjoyed it, but I was in such a hurry. And then later in life, you look back and reflect on that, and you're like, I was, I think, like 22 years old, topped out for maybe a year. Somebody offered me a foreman spot. He grabbed it up, couldn't wait, so excited. And I just wish I would have done some things differently, for sure, that way.
I haven't heard anybody say that yet, but it's so true. I'm just like, I'm thinking about this now, and I'm like, you're so right. People don't realize how long your life can be if you don't die. Like, and your working career could be 40 years. Like, that's as long as I've been on the planet. That could be your working. Like, slow down. That's great advice. Just slow down. Just take it all in as it comes. Don't be in a rush to do anything, whether that comes to purchasing that truck or jumping on that foreman job, or just chill. That's so good. As far as teaching and passing down things to the next gen, we talked about that a little bit. What's your advice for that guy right now that's looking and wanting to get into your position, or you moving up? Like, how do you look the other direction versus looking down?
Yeah, I mean, I think for that, you got to be willing to take on a lot of the things that nobody else wants to do. Because, I mean, I've literally been in situations where they've asked me to be the GF or the superintendent, and they're like, literally, what's the other option? And nobody else wants to do it. So I was like, well, I feel like I can lead these guys. I can make a difference. You got to be willing to put in a lot of late nights. You're not going to get paid for every hour you work if you want to be successful. And then don't be afraid to ask for advice from people that mentored you, or, I talk to people from other contractors, in similar positions.
For sure.
I do not hesitate to call them if I have a question. I'm still pretty dang young, so I've definitely not seen it all. And there's a lot of dudes out here that have been here doing this for a lot longer than me. So I just try to soak up any knowledge from them. And then I guess really just learn, if you want to learn the business side of things, kind of ask your your superintendent or, project manager to just talk to you and share some of these things with you, how much a man hour costs the company versus how much revenue they make off of it. Ask how much things cost. I mean, inflation's been crazy, but I mean, just the cost of these tools and line work are insane. Equipment is expensive and hard to get. So when you get a new piece of equipment, treat that thing with respect and take care of it. Because if you break it, there might not be another brand new truck ready to go for 2 years. Like that's the supply chain was a real problem. And so we had to get our equipment orders in 2 years in advance, So I don't know, when you know a little bit more of these facts or these things, I feel like you think differently. And I don't know, or maybe just me. I could just be the oddball, but I think for me, it opened my eyes and made me want to do a good job, take care of things, and make the company money.
Is there something specific a person can do, like in their own time, whether it's study or something specific to help push them?
Yeah, I mean, there's like our company now has kind of suggested taking some light courses and just like entry-level type business management courses. I think those are good. Honestly, the PMP certification, the project management certification is really good and valuable. So I've done that. I think it definitely teaches you a totally different side of business. It's not just man hours and estimating jobs. It's actually accounting and permit facilitation, stuff like that becomes important as you get into management. I actually had a chance to obtain the contractor's license for our company for Hawaii and Alaska. So I was able to enroll in some classes to facilitate that. And so that was a huge learning experience for me too. So yeah, I mean, those would just kind of be my pieces of advice for anybody that was really serious about trying to get into management.
What's your take on safety in the trade right now?
I think it's improving. I think a lot of the advancements in safety, maybe we had a lull where we had guys that were trained to free climb and trained to be a little more cowboy. And so I think when safety rules come down, it's typically from an incident or something that's happened. And we needed to shift that culture, because I was guilty as much as anybody of thinking, oh, whoever had the accident that got that rule created must be stupid. And that would never happen to me. And so I think there was a lot more pushback on safety advancements, at least in my opinion, for probably the last 10 to 12 years. But I think there's been a shift because they started training these guys from the time they go to line school or get in the apprenticeship. They're trained with these new safety advancements like the buck squeeze and climbing and 100% tie off, things like that. They don't know any different. So when they get in the trade, that's all they know from the time they start till the time they top out. And I think now we're getting some of those guys that are linemen, and it's becoming more of a habit, but I think we definitely have a long ways to go. I think we have some different hazards now than we did before. I think induction has always been a hazard, but it's never been a bigger hazard than it is now. And I feel like the knowledge gap is still pretty wide for a lot of these hands out here that, EPZ, grounding and bonding, if you fully understand the theory behind that and why it works, it'll keep you safe. And there's a lot of guys that think that they do it because that's what the rule says, and they don't entirely grasp how to create an equipotential zone. And we still have way too many induction incidents. We had one a couple of years ago, and a guy just got in a hurry, but he flew out, landed on a steel arm, 115, and was waiting on the tester and grounds to be flown out to them to test and ground. And the task was to change out insulators from dead-end polymers to glass. So they needed to know how many bells to put together to keep the tension the same. So, we measured that with a ruler. So for whatever reason, this guy had a metal tape in his pouch, and he just had a brain fart, I guess. I don't know. He's waiting on the tester and the grounds to come out. His crew's all on the structure waiting, and they weren't paying attention. And he grabs this tape, and he's going to measure the insulator. And it was the Energized, but it was in a hot corridor. And there was grounds on the line. They just needed to put the personals on at that location. And he got hung up on the Corona ring, and he passed out. He fell into his lifeline, and thank God it wasn't fatal or more serious than it was. But man, he never thought, he thought there was grounds on. He never thought that hazard was there.
Yeah.
And it's just crazy. Recently down in Southern Cal, at the quarterly Red Book meeting, which is like our safety committee for California, the guys were talking about an induction incident. They were in the Mojave River Basin, and there was, I think, 2 500 lines and 2 230 lines that paralleled this 161, I believe, or 115 line. And anyway, they were tasked with just changing out H structures, and they were putting in culverts to account for the potential water rise, I guess. And the culvert was 27 feet long, and they had 7 ground rods driven, from what I understand. They had floated the wire off the old structure, and everything was tied together. They thought they had everything tied together, and the wire got between the boom and the culvert. So Lineman went over there just to put the wire on the other side of the culvert. Well, they hadn't bonded the culvert to their grounding scheme, and he got between the culvert and the wire, and they had to use an AED to bring him back. And man, that one hit home, because I feel like that one could have happened to anybody. And so you really need to step back and look at your entire work zone and make sure that everything is at the same potential and everybody understands what that means. Because I still feel like there's a gap. And, Brady Hansen is great. He does a fantastic training.
Yeah.
You can tell that guy cares about this industry.
100%.
And every person sitting in that room feels like he's talking to them. And I wish there was more people like him, because he's only one dude. We've all tried to get him to come do his class for our safety days that we put on. But man, I wish there was like more people that wanted to get into training and have that desire to make a difference, because I just feel like there's a gap out there and we need to close it.
It's tough. I totally get it. QES is trying their, Absequant is trying their hardest as well. They've got an amazing equal potential grounding bonding program, a course to take, but it's same thing. Finding the ability to train this many people. It's just such a large volume of people, and it's one of those topics too that people get so freaking hard-headed about. It's just like they learned something through their apprenticeship, and it's the hill they're gonna die on, it seems, when they're just so wrong. Even they're so far wrong, but they think they're so right, and they'll just fight you over it and fight you over it and fight you over it. And it's like, yeah.
I remember coming up, there was stickers on every part truck that said, if it's not grounded, it's not dead. And that's what we live by. I mean, I still remember a lot of those rules that were beat into our heads. And back then we thought you put grounds on both sides of you at the end of the line, and you go to work and you're good to go. And I think I got lucky, or we did a lot, because I was working in the Midwest. Honestly, maybe production wasn't as big of a hazard, but man, you get out here in some of these hot corridors, and it's a real hazard. And there's guys that die every year, because they aren't able to identify it and mitigate it.
I was doing a 500 kV insulator replacement project we went over the course of about 3 years. Some of it was bare hand, some of it was de-energized, and it was in a hot corridor. So we had a de-energized 500 kV line and 3 paralleling 500 kV lines energized. So hot as a firecracker, all on one right away for miles and miles, right straight up the belly of British Columbia. And every time we pulled that bond off, we'd draw a 20, 30, 40 foot dragon off of that conductor. It's insane. And it's just like, and it would echo down the valley. And that's every time. People they don't get that portion. They just haven't seen how freaking crazy it can be. So if it's that one time that you're in a situation like that, where you've got that kind of, induced voltage on a line, and you just don't realize because you've got away with it for the last 20 years or 10 years, man, it's going to get you. And it's just one of those topics that I just think that people are so hard-headed on and just don't understand. And it's a lot of times it's just it's actually a simple math problem. Like just do the math.
And that incident I talked about down in Southern California with the culvert, they went out later that day and they tried to measure the amount of induction on that line, and it was almost nothing. And it's like it can change so much during the day, from the wind, from the sun, loading on the other lines. Like it's not, you can't see it. It's not constant, but it's there, or it could be there, and you've got to mitigate it. You've got to account for it every time, because there's nothing worse than the guy that got away with it 100 times. And so he's convinced there's no risk there. And then you have that one time, man, and he might not make it home that night. So I think that's important on us as contractors to do our part to try to train these guys and change the culture overall. It's tough for us because we get so many travelers that you feel like you're constantly trying to train and get everybody adept with the culture that you're trying to foster. And then they leave and you get a new guy, but it can be frustrating and it can be tiring, but I just feel like we got to keep going. We owe it to these guys to put them in the safest position possible and give them all the knowledge that we can.
It is our responsibility as like the bigger contractors to like just to accept that burden of training because you don't know, like you said before, like you don't know if that guy goes away, tells his buddies, I had this amazing experience, and takes back what he learned, maybe helps save a life back where he was from. Like it's so, when you're dealing with safety, it's so prolific. Like you can't even grasp how big it is and how big of an impact you're making. It's our responsibility to do that if we can, because there's so many small utilities and small contractors, and man, it's just such a big topic. I wish that everybody in the country, in the world, could be fully trained on that topic alone, and just like how many lives you would save and potential incidences and everything if you just trained up.
Yeah, I agree. I think two things would make a huge change in the culture in this country: an increased knowledge of EPZ, grounding and bonding, and then improved tailboards. And that sounds so simple, but once you've been a part of that Quanta program and the Varian tailboards, and you see how seriously they take, like we always used to say that a monkey could do the work. Once you put the plan in place, a monkey could do it because you're literally just following the steps that are laid out. And when you come upon a roadblock to any of those steps, it's hold on, come down, we're going to re-rig. And why don't we do that more? And then I feel like there's one more thing, I guess, that really kills me, because Michael's is a gas company as well. They do a lot of gas installation and pipeline. And all their operators are required to continue training, and they have what's called operator qualification. So you can't perform a certain type of work unless you've kept up training and certification and tested. I don't know if it's yearly. I'm not sure how often they have to do that. But that's crazy to me, because line work is every bit as dangerous as gas work. And why aren't we treating it like it is? Why are we treating every task as if it's as serious as it could be? Because it can be an easy task, but how serious could it be if things went wrong? Somebody could die. I feel like we need to treat it with the respect that it deserves, and take the time to do a good tailboard. And when something's not going your way, because it's going to happen, we need to all come down and talk about it, get a new plan, and attack it from a different angle.
I loved that portion of the Bareham course.
Yeah.
It's such a big deal. Pre-planning and just, yeah, that whole stop work, get everybody on the same page. And it's just that, like, in Bareham work, if there's a problem, your first aid kit is a dustpan and a broom, not, so it matters, but it matters in all levels. Like, and I wish that we could apply the same principle to distribution, right down to distribution work or gas work or whatever it is that we're working on. And I think that we can, maybe not to that extent where everybody stops and you write a new step on the tailboard and everybody signs, but you can still stop work. And I still think if you start with that, just stop work for 5 minutes, guys. Everybody come down. Everybody's talk about this. Everybody verbally sign off on it, and then go back to work and execute the thing you talked about. Don't do something different the second you get up there, just because you see something different. If you need to change it again, come down again. But I think you could save so much by doing that. And it's not like I don't want to. I can just hear linemen out there. You like that. You need to be productive, or the company this, the company's that. He's pushing time on me. I need to be productive. I need, you can hear all of that in the background, but I don't care. It's your life, man. Like it's your life and your crew's life. You do the right thing.
Yeah. When I got hurt, that's when I really changed, I guess, the way I prioritize things. I say it all the time in the helicopter class, and I know I've already said it, but I tell these guys, that pilot anyway, in that example, if he has a problem, you have a problem with him, and you question it, you're questioning his livelihood. But if you just jump on the light and go out there and go to work, you're risking your life. So who cares if you ruffle some feathers? Don't go be an asshole, but question anything. And if you're the guy on the crew that blows the apprentice off, or the groundman, or the inspector, or anybody, then you're a problem. Like, you need to listen to any and all concerns and move forward when everybody's comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%, man. All right, I got a couple of closing questions I just like to do, kind of more for fun, just like a finish my sentence kind of thing. So we'll go with these, and then we'll say peace. So if you could live anywhere else in the world, or live anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Puerto Rico, when I was down there. I was only there for a short time, but we went back since for vacation, and my family and we all love it. So, eventually I think we'll probably end up with a place down there, but yeah, that place was super, super awesome.
Very cool. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've yet to get there, but Quanah has a big presence there, so maybe I'll get there soon. If you could have coffee with any historical figure from the past, who would that be and why?
Probably Henry Miller, I think, honestly. Just to kind of pick his brain about what pushed them to band together and what that process was like. Even though I'm in management, I'm still super proud to be a union lineman, and that our history has gotten us a long ways. And so it would just be interesting to me to figure out what that looked like. I know a little bit about trying to get men to follow you and do something for the greater good, but man, they lived it. They got it done. And I always thought that was super impressive.
I've been diving into the American Lineman book a little bit lately, just because I've been just doing this little micro series for social media. So I've been reading a little bit about that, and I 100% agree with you. Like, it must have been extremely difficult in times like that, because it was so foreign. The idea of doing something like that was so foreign. So to band like a group of people together that were all willing and able and willing to take a stand and like form something like that and say no and fight back, like, damn, man.
Yeah. And risk your livelihood. And now we have unions. So, sometimes you might be in a contract negotiation that gets contentious, but there's precedent, for that. Back then there wasn't. And
exactly.
They had to make a decision that this might not turn out well, but this is what we're going to do. And I've got a lot of respect for those guys that pioneered the way for us.
Yeah. What a task that would have been. So if you weren't a lineman, what would you want to do for a career?
I don't really know. I mean, I loved farming. I don't know if that was like a career for me. My family farmed, but they weren't any kind of high production or huge farms. So it was a way for them to make a living. I think I always would have wanted a little bit more for myself. I just have kind of always been a go-getter. So a couple of things that I considered after I got hurt was like engineering, stuff like that, staying in the trade, but kind of from a different perspective. So
Yeah, very cool.
I think I'd probably be an engineer, most likely.
Very cool. What's the most valuable tool in your kit? It doesn't have to be a lineman kit. It could be your kit.
Well, I still think it's the ticket, your lineman ticket. You can go anywhere in the world, really, but definitely in the country. And I've been all over. I did a little bit of time in South Africa with Kwana. I went to BC and worked with some of those all-tech guys up there. That was super cool. So just the places I've been and people that I've met, I think that is definitely the most invaluable thing that I have. And even now, I could get tired of what I'm doing today and decide I'm ready to go, and I could go anywhere still today. So, I mean, for me, that's it.
Yeah, I agree. If you could change one thing about the industry, what would it be?
Just the overall culture. Like I mentioned, I wish there was a more, I wish there was more of an attitude that what we do is serious and is dangerous, and we should treat everything as such, not blow over the minute tasks, the things that we don't think are important, because I've been that guy that was hurt, and I've been on crews with guys that have gotten hurt, and it changes lives. I mean, I got hurt and came back to work, but it affected my life. It still does, physically and mentally, the way you think about things. So everything we do out here can hurt or kill somebody, and I just wish there was a little bit more care given to proper planning and execution of everything, all tasks.
All right, cool. Last one. Best piece of advice you ever received?
Probably there's a couple, but I mentioned it earlier, but I think as far as what's made me successful is the guy told me not to be afraid to hire somebody smarter than you. That's probably my number one. That, and then finding out what everybody's good at, and then using that to your advantage and their advantage.
Love it, dude. That's awesome. Well, thanks for your time. I appreciate you coming on.
Yep, thanks.
All right, guys, I hope you got a ton of value out of that episode. I really enjoyed that combo, and I know I got a lot out of it. Like I said in the beginning, I love that perspective from the line side and management. I think it really opens people's eyes to both sides. And it's I like this sharing of information from management down to the linemen, because we don't get the full picture. We don't get the full story all the time. So I really like those parts of the episode. Like I said, I hope you got some value out of it. If I can do the super duper influencer thing and get you to jump on YouTube, jump on all of the podcast platforms, make sure you're subscribed, followed, liked, all those good things. And we'll see you in the next one. All right, peace.